Hey everybody, welcome to Christ Community Chapel. My name's Joe. I'm one of the pastors here. And if you are seeing me on the screen in East Hall or in the gym, welcome. I have to do that because we are in the middle of remodeling our sanctuary as part of our Every Minute Matters campaign. And that means we are displaced for the time being. We have all kinds of services. Everybody's going to a different service than they went to before. And I just want you to know, this isn't the first time that happened. Back in 1997, when we were a church of a little less than 600 people, we sold our building to Seton Catholic School up there on Stowe Road. And we moved into Cauga Valley Christian Academy for 3 years while we built this building. And for 3 years, we did what we called church out of a box. We were displaced. We would pull up a big truck in the back of the school every Sunday. We would unload everything we needed to do church. And then at the end of the services, we would load it up back in. We did that rain or shine, snow or sleet, and we had a blast. I remember laughing together with guys in the middle of winter when somebody threw a package of baby wipes and they were frozen solid, and we thought there are going to be some chapped buns today, you know. But we grew, not just in the number of people, we grew closer together. And that's what I want to encourage you with now. Church people are people of habit. So if you've been coming any length of time, you usually sit in the same section around the same people. And now you're around different people. So go ahead and ask them who they are, how long they've been coming. Lean into this time that we are displaced. Check out a different venue, but just see what God does. Because part of the thing, when I look back on the time we did church out of the box, it's some of my favorite memories. That's what I want for you. When you look back on this summer of more, that you will look back with great memories of what God did in and with and through you during this time. All right? Okay. We are in a series on Proverbs where we're looking for wisdom, and we're calling it More Wisdom, More Life. Wisdom is what you need for all those decisions in life that are not right or wrong decisions. The right, wrong decisions in some ways are the easy ones because at least you know what God has said. When he gives just clear instructions about your sexuality or about your money or about how to treat other people, that's easy because at least you know. But then there are other decisions where you just don't know exactly what to do. That's when you need wisdom. And one of the interesting things about Proverbs is that Proverbs doesn't tell us so much how to make wise decisions as it does how to become the kind of person who makes wise decisions. And today we come to the topic of self-control. And this is the proverb. This is Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. A person without self-control is not going to live their best life. If you don't have self-control, you're going to mess your life up and probably the lives of the people that are around you. Okay, so here are my 3 points that I want to pull out and just cover in our time together. I want to talk about the danger, the cause, and the cure. That's it. The danger, the cause, and the cure. First, the danger. So Solomon, who wrote this proverb, says that a man without self-control is like a city broken into and without walls. One of the great advantages if you lived in the ancient world was to live in a city with walls, because walls meant safety, it meant security, it meant peace. And to live there meant that you enjoyed those things. Nehemiah, in the book of Nehemiah is in exile. Israel has been conquered by Babylon. He has gone to Babylon. He has risen to the place of being the cupbearer for the king. And he hears that the walls of Jerusalem are rubble. And he sits down and he weeps. And then he kind of comes up with a plan to restore Jerusalem. And his plan isn't to have economic restoration. He doesn't come with a temporary government or anything like that. What he comes with is a plan to rebuild the walls, because he realized that the walls were the most important thing, because the walls will protect anything and everything that's valuable to you. Solomon says, your soul, my soul, are just like that. That self-control is what protects what we think and what we feel is valuable in our lives. And without self-control, we are like a city without walls. All right? So he has come to us and told us this whole idea that self-control is what we need. And self-control is the ability to manage your desires, to manage your longings. It's actually the ability to order your desires in the best order possible in order to have the best life you can have. I remember when my kids were teenagers and I was trying to talk to them about self-control. And they wanted me to give them more freedom so they could make their own decisions instead of me making so many decisions for them. And I don't know if they'd taken a physiology course or what, but this is what I landed on. I said self-control is like this. There are two types of creatures. There are creatures with endoskeletons and creatures with ectoskeletons. And an endoskeleton creature is like a human being where your bones are on the inside, and so your strength and structure come from the inside out. And then an ectoskeleton is like a crab where the strength comes from the outside in. And I said to them, listen, until I'm sure that you have formed an endoskeleton and you have strength from within to manage your desires, I will be your ectoskeleton and I will make those decisions for you. Like you need to do your homework before you watch the movie. I wanted to find a way to see if they could order their desires in the best possible way. One of the dangers, by the way, of growing up in a home like mine where the parent was responsible for giving the structure is that sometimes the child can go away to college and then find out that all their structure and strength came from outside of them, and they get to college and they become a city without walls. And their lives are just run over. And that's what you hear about all the time. And so that's the danger. That brings me to my second point, which is the cause. If you have no self-control, then you're in a terrible trouble. I mean, you'd be homeless. Right? My 2-year-old grandson has very little self-control, but he's only 2, but he can't live on his own. That's what that means. You know, most of us have some self-control. We have walls, but we might have breaches in the walls, places that aren't completely solid. You know, the Bible has a couple of images for Satan. One of them is in John chapter 10, where Jesus says that Satan is like a thief who comes in to steal and kill and destroy. And then in 1 Peter, he describes Satan as a lion who is prowling around. So if you think of your soul being like a walled city, you have Satan prowling around looking for a breach that he can get into in order to steal and kill and destroy. Right? And then the question is, what causes a breach? Well, if self-control is the ability to order your desires in the best possible order, then a breach happens when when a desire gets out of order. When a teenager decides to watch the movie and not do his homework, and then he never gets around to his homework, that's a breach that there will be chaos that happens after that. He doesn't know exactly how much chaos. There was a movie years ago starring Ted Danson and Ethan Hawke. And in that movie, Ethan Hawke is the son, and Ted Danson is the father. And Ted Danson had left the family years ago, and the family had kind of blown up. And now Ethan Hawke is a young man, and he sits down with his father, and he says to him, "What happened? Why did you leave us? Why did our family just disintegrate and blow up?" And after some hemming and hawing, then Ted Danson said, "Well, I guess when I was working and I started making money, I felt like a success. So I wanted to work more. And the more I worked, the more I felt like I was failing at home, and the more that made me want to work and then things just fell apart. What happened? I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful, nothing wrong with making money. What happened with Ted Danson in that movie is that it just got out of order and it caused a breach, and then he lost everything. Felicity Huffman, 2019. She was the star of the sitcom Desperate Housewives. And in 2018-17, she was like a darling. And then in 2019, she got arrested. And she got put in prison because she spent $15,000 to bribe a proctor of the SAT to correct her daughter's answers so that her daughter could get into the college she wanted to get into. What happened? There's nothing wrong with wanting your daughter to get into the college that she wants. Nothing wrong with loving your daughter. What happened was that desire got out of order and became so important to her that it caused a breach. And she ended up in prison, losing everything that she held dear. So how do we create a life where our soul is protected, where we have walls and no breaches in our walls? And that brings me to my final point, which is the cure. A few weeks ago, I read a novel about a terrorist. And in that story, the mastermind who recruited the terrorist was describing how he got him to do everything. And he said he was a young man without self-control. And somebody without self-control can easily fall into the control of another. It's like Bob Dylan wrote a song back in the 60s and 70s, Everybody Serves Somebody. And he says it may be the devil, it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. The reason that's so important is Felicity Huffman didn't wake up one morning and think, hey, I'm going to try something that could and will land me in prison, which she got up that morning and just said, I love my daughter so much that she became the servant of that desire. There's a guy named Jonathan Edwards who was an 18th century pastor, theologian, thinker. He's actually considered one of the best minds that ever came out of America. And he said something that I think is pretty profound. He said that every human being always does what they most want. They always follow their deepest desire. And I say that sounds profound, or that's profound to me, because if that's true, that means that the secret for self-control is not willpower. And I always thought it was. I always thought, like, I want something really bad. I just have to will myself to not get that. But that's not what, he says that's not the way it works. And somebody challenged him and he said, no, I've had to do things I don't want to do. Like I got robbed and I gave the guy my money. I didn't want to give him my money. And what Jonathan Edwards said was, oh no, your desire was for your life more than money. Your greatest desire always wins. And of course, the kicker with that is sometimes if something gets out of order, then the thing we desire the most is what we lose. I read an article about the Godfather movies because I was really interested in. And this article said that that the whole Godfather 1 and 2 was designed to bring you to the very end of Godfather 2. Because Godfather 1, the reason the Godfather became the Godfather was all because of family. Everything was about the family. The family was close. The family was to be protected. The family was, you're loyal to the family. At the end of Godfather 2, Michael Corleone, who's the Godfather, is sitting, this is the last scene, he's sitting in a garden alone. In a chair, the wind is blowing, and he has nobody. He has no family left. And the reason is because of self-control. That his desires were out, it created a breach, and what he held dear was the choice. So how do we make sure? How do we make sure our desires are in the proper order? Whenever I ask a question like that, how are things supposed to be? I always go back to the Garden of Eden. And in the Garden of Eden, I don't think Adam and Eve had I don't think they struggled with self-control, at least not at first. I think they loved being with God. They loved to walk with God. I don't think they wanted anything too much. I don't think they wanted food too much. I don't think they wanted success too much. I don't think they wanted sex too much. I think everything was in the order that it was supposed to be in. And then Satan comes, and Satan tempts them to want something more than God. And what's interesting is that Satan didn't tempt them to go from loving God to hating God. What Satan did was all he needed to do was to get God from being number one to being number two. That's it. And that caused enough of a breach for Satan to come into our world to steal and kill and destroy everything. There's a reason in the Gospel of Matthew that Jesus says that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, because loving God is the secret to everything. The secret to self-control is not willpower, it's affection. So the question is then, how do we love God? How do we get to the place where we love him with all our heart and our soul and our mind? Now, there's a story I read years ago. It's a great story. Story of a man was riding a train, and there were two men on the train. He was watching them. They seemed like they had a kind of a special relationship, and all of a sudden, one of those guys went into a seizure, and his friend picked him up and laid him in the aisle of the train and cradled his head in his lap and tried to comfort and soothe him until the seizure was over and his friend fell asleep. And the guy who was witnessing this said to him, "Tell me about your friend. Tell me what's going on." And the man said, "Well, my friend and I we served in the war together. And one time we were in a firefight in the jungle, and I got shot in my legs. And I was there in the jungle, and I couldn't walk, and I was going to die. He came back for me, and he put me on his shoulders, and he carried me out. He saved me. 5 years ago, I found out he had this condition. And so I sold my house, and I've come to care for him." And then he said this, "Because, mister, after what he did for me, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him." We take communion every week here at CCC. The reason we do that is to remind ourselves that's what Jesus did for us. 1 John 4 says that we love because he first loved us. The secret to self-control is not willpower, it's affection. The more I will love God with all my heart, soul, mind, the more I realize how much he has loved me, the easier it will be for me to have desires in their proper order and be protected. You know, there's another proverb. This proverb was, "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." There's a proverb in Proverbs chapter 18 that says, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe." That's the thing. What I want to encourage you to do today, if you want to keep your soul protected, then figure out how to make Jesus front and center, how to make communion a reminder, how every day remind yourself of how much you are loved so that your affection goes to him. Because the secret of self-control will always be what you love and who you love. Run to God. Let him be your strong tower and build the walls that will keep your soul safe. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, thank you for your grace to us. Thanks that self-control, that it is based on our affection and our love, and that you have given us the greatest reason to really love you. And so I pray that you would help all of us here, and help me, to love you in such a way where all my desires fall into the proper order. So I become like a city with walls, with the most precious things protected, because they're protected by you. Thanks. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.